Masechet Nedarim, Daf Vav. We've been speaking about the machloket between Abaye and Rava about unclear or ambiguous abbreviations. If someone makes an abbreviation for a neder, that whatever I eat from you, that's all he says. So if it's obvious that he means that will be prohibited, then yes, abbreviations are a standard thing. Everyone agrees that abbreviations regarding the Nedarim are effective. But if it's ambiguous, if it's not clear, in that case, Abaye says it's valid. Rava says no, it is not valid. We tried to line up this machloket between these two Amoraim with these Tanaim regarding a get. If you have unclear get language, Chachamim say it is valid. Rabbi Yehuda said it's not valid. So perhaps Abaye would agree with Chachamim, Rava would agree with Rabbi Yehuda. We concluded at the end of the daf yesterday that not necessarily. A get could have different requirements than Nedarim, and so, in fact, Abaye and Rava could both explain their own opinions according to all of the Tanaim. Alright, that's where we left it. And now we are going to do three things on this daf. Number one, we're going to bring a challenge to Abaye, who says that ambiguous abbreviations are valid. And then we're going to ask about abbreviations for Kiddushin. Do they work? How about abbreviations for Pe'ah? Do they work? If someone says Hareat Mikudeshet Li, instead of that, he just says Hareat. Is that sufficient? And the next stuff after that will continue with other cases. Do abbreviations work for that? All right, so let's begin with the challenge to Abaye. Me'tibe, harehu alai, hareze alai, asur, mipnei shehu yad lekorban. If a person picks up some item, like picks up a pen, and says, "This is upon me," hereby this is upon me, that is prohibited because it is an abbreviation for a sacrifice. It's as if he's saying, "This will be upon me like a sacrifice," meaning just like a sacrifice prohibited, so too, not that he's going to sacrifice his pen, but it'll be prohibited to him. That is the language of a neder. That's all the Braita says. But now we're going to infer something from it. Tamad amad alai huda surava lo amad alai lo. The only reason why it's prohibited is because he had the full sentence harehu alai, which is not ambiguous. But if it was ambiguous, you just said he picked the pen and says harehu, and then it would be invalid. So we can see that according to this Braita, a very short abbreviation that's not clear is invalid. Tiyubta de Abaye. This is a challenge to Abaye, who says that ambiguous abbreviations are valid. So Abaye is going to offer a couple of other alternative interpretations of the Braita. Amalach Abaye, Tamad amar alai hu de asur, aval amar harehu velo amar alai, harehu de hefker, harehu distaka ka amar. So Abaye says, I agree that the reason in this Braita that he's prohibited is because he said alai. He does need that word. And I agree, if it didn't say the word alai, then it would be invalid. But that's only because without the word alai, this is not just an ambiguous abbreviation. It's not an abbreviation of anything at all, of a neder at all. Because I don't know what he means that, behold this. Maybe he means to say, behold, this is free for all, is ownerless. Behold, this is going to be for tzedakah. Behold, this is going to be a gift. So he could mean a lot of things with the words harehu. So even Abaye, who says yes, an ambiguous abbreviation does make a valid neder, that as long as it's clear that it is in fact a neder. If it's so ambiguous that it doesn't even mean that it's a neder, then even Abaye would say that it is invalid. All right, so good. So that seems to be a good answer. The problem is that the Braita didn't just give examples, it also gave a reason. Because it is a yad lekorban. Yad lekorban katane. And regarding korbanot, if a person would say this type of language, if we take an animal and say harehu, that actually would be a valid statement and make it a korban. And so too, if it says here, because it is a yad lekorban, therefore it is also a yad for a neder, then that means that even though it's very ambiguous and we're not sure what he meant, harehu what, nevertheless, by adding that reason in, it means that it should be valid, like a korban is valid, so too this same language regarding a neder should also be valid. So we need another answer for Abaye. How will Abaye explain this baraita? If it says harehu alai, only then it's valid. But without the word alai, it's invalid. Doesn't that indicate that something ambiguous is invalid? Why'd you say it's valid, Abaye? Ela ema tamad amar alaihu asur v'chaber mutar. Valamar harehu shenehen asurin. Abaye is going to go now to the opposite direction. If he said the full language, harezo alai, or harehu alai, then only the person making the vow is prohibited, right? This is prohibited upon me, so then the pen, I cannot use it. But someone else, my friend, he can use it, even though it's my pen. I didn't make it prohibited to him because I only said alai. But if I use the shorter formula, harehu, then both of us are prohibited, right? The vower and whoever else I am speaking to. Shededilma harehu hekdesh kamar, because that could be a short form for, behold, this is hekdesh. And when we have something that's ambiguous, and we know he's making something prohibited, but we're not sure how prohibited or to whom, then we have to assume the worst. We have to assume the most stringent. So since it could be that he's saying this is hekdesh, or it's like hekdesh, and that would make it prohibited to all of us, then it's actually even more prohibited. And so Abaye now is good, because you see that an ambiguous formula, harehu, ambiguous abbreviation, is in fact valid. And this braita was actually only coming to limit. Harehu alai is less prohibitive than harehu by itself. All right, that seems to work, but we have another braita that's going to contradict it. Me'tibe harezo hatat harezo asham afapishu chayav hatat ve'asham lo amar kelum. This is going to be the basis of the answer. He says this language harezo hatat, which is similar to harehu, right? And it's even actually more than that. And in this case, he did not say anything because it's too ambiguous. He has to say, harezo hatati, harezo ashami, im haya mechuyav devarav kayamin. So in the second half explains that if he was required to bring a korban hatat or korban asham, and he said, harezo hatati, then that is valid. But even in that case, if he said harezo chatati and he was not liable to bring a korban hatat, then it's invalid. The reason is because you cannot volunteer a korban hatat. The only way to bring korban hatat is if you actually sinned by mistake for a sin that requires a korban hatat or a korban asham. So that's why it has to be that you have a need to bring a hatat and you said hatati. But if you said just harezo hatat and without my a hatat for me, even if you are liable to a hatat, you didn't say anything because it's too ambiguous. You're not making clear that this hatat will be for me for the sin that I owe. So you have to say this is my chatat, and you have to actually owe one. What you see here is that this language of harehu, even if you meant harehu chatat, would not be valid. Even if you actually owed a chatat, you have to say alai, for me. And therefore, this answer that harehu would make everyone prohibited would go against this baraita. Tiyufta de Abaye. So what's he going to answer? Amalach Abaye hamane Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Abaye could say, oh, this baraita must be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. He is the one. Right? Remember, regarding the get, is the one that said an unclear get language is not valid. And here too, regarding a korban, he's saying the unclear language is invalid. That's his opinion. But I'm going to follow Rabbanan, and I would say it is valid in this case, and that's how I can explain the braita above. All right, so this is a good answer. The problem is, but in the previous daf, Abaye said, I think my opinion is true according to everyone. I think unclear abbreviations are valid, and even the Rabbi Yehuda would agree. He just says that unclear language regarding a get is not valid, because a get has to be an absolute separation. You cannot have any discrepancy, any ambiguity when it comes to a get. But regarding a neder, Rabbi Yehuda would agree with me. That's Abaye. That's what you said yesterday. So now you can't just say that this baraita is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. You said Rabbi Yehuda would agree with you. The answer is hadar be. Abaye changed his mind and he says, no, in fact, I'm only going like Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda would not agree with me. So it's actually helpful to him because that way when he finds this difficult b'raita, he can say that's Rabbi Yehuda. And he is following Chachamim, which is perfectly valid. He's following the majority opinion. All right. Now, once we sever one half of the of what we said yesterday, so now should we also, if Abaye is only following Chachamim, should we say that Rava also is only following Rabbi Yehuda? All right. In other words, yesterday we tried to say Abaye is like Chachamim, Rava is like Rabbi Yehuda. Then we answered no, not necessarily. Abaye could be according to both, and Rava could be according to both. Now that Abaye changed his mind and said, "Oh, in fact, I'm only going to be a Chachamim," does that mean that Rava also changed his mind and he's only like Rabbi Yehuda? We say no. Amar lach Rava, ana damidafil Rabbanan. No, I'm going to still follow Rabbanan. See, it's worse for Rava to follow only Rabbi Yehuda, the minority opinion. So Rava is going to continue with the same thought he had before, that his opinion is according to both. Ad kan la kamri Rabbanan de la b'nei adam machichot el gabe get. Rabbanan, it's true, say regarding a get that ambiguous language is okay. That's true for a get, de'en adam megareshet eshet havero, where the ambiguity is not so problematic. A person can only divorce his own wife. He can't divorce someone else's wife, and so therefore, and also the context makes it clear. They're having a fight. There's tension. He writes this document that says, "Okay, go marry anybody else." So there, the ambiguous language is clarified by the context and the fact that it's very limited people that a person can give a get to. But in other cases, regarding Nedarim, where a person can make a neder about anything, to anyone, so there you need more clarity. Even Rabbanan, Rava says, would agree with me that you need clarity, and ambiguous abbreviations would not work. So Rava is going to stick with his own opinion, and so it turns out that Abaye is following Chachamim, and Rava can be following both of them. So their machloket actually is within Chachamim. Would Chachamim say unclear get is valid, and that's true for Neder also, or that's only true for get, but Neder is different from a get? All right, that concludes the challenge to Abaye, and now the question about abbreviations for Kiddushin. Can you use an abbreviation when you're going to do Kiddushin to someone? You have to do an act because you have to give the person a money, if you're doing it by money. But the language that you say, can you say a shortened version instead of the full Hareat Mikudeshet Li? Kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, can you say something shorter? Hechi dameh ilema damala leisha hareat mikudeshet li v'amad lechaberta ve'at nameh pishita. So what kind of case are you talking about? He went to one woman, he said hareat mikudeshet li, and then to her friend who was right next to her, he said ve'at nameh, you also. So in that case, pishita haynu kiddushin asman. Everyone would agree that that is valid kiddushin, because that's actually a full language of Kiddushin. He said a full statement, and then he's saying, ditto, you also. So it's very clear. There's nothing ambiguous about that. It's not even an abbreviation. He's just saying, applying the full statement he said to one person, and that applies to you also. Everyone would agree with that. So there are the cases that to one woman he said the full formula, and to the other woman, maybe the bridesmaid or whatever, he said ve'at, you, and you, right? And you. What does that mean? Mi'amrinan ve'at nameh. Is that the same as saying and you also, and she would be mikudeshet also? We have to assume that's a case where somehow he transferred money to her also, because if you just say words, it doesn't affect anything. Maybe he gave money to a third party, a messenger, to give to her, or something like that, or give it to the first wife on behalf of the second wife, a second woman. Okay, so he said, so do we assume that ve'at means and you also will be married through this? Amar la l'chaberta v'tafseh b'kiddushin l'chaberta, and therefore it is valid. Or dilma ve'at hazai amar la l'chaberta v'la tafseh b'kiddushin l'chaberta. Or maybe and you means that and you would you consider also marrying me? And maybe that's what he meant. Right? He said harem mikodesh li to one, and then looked at the other ve'at. Like a question, right? How about you? But it was not an actual formula of yes, ve'at. It was not a statement. And so therefore, it would not be a valid kiddushin. That's the question. So we're not talking about ambiguous abbreviations here. We're just talking about any abbreviation. Would that work for kiddushin? or not? So that was Papa's question. We don't answer it. We actually have a question about that. Did Papa really have a question about abbreviations in regard to Kiddushin? Papa once asked Abaye the following: He asked Abaye about a statement that Shemuel said. And he said, wait, according to that statement, this is found in Kiddushin. He says, according to that statement of Shemuel, does that mean that Shemuel thinks that unclear abbreviations are in fact good abbreviations? And that was in the context of Kiddushin. So if he's asking about that, his only question there was about ambiguous abbreviations. Wait, does Shemuel really think that or not? So, but that means that Papa, by asking that question himself, sounds like he agrees that abbreviations generally in Kiddushin are valid. Right, so doesn't he know the answer then already? Over here, it sounds like he's asking the question. He doesn't know the answer. But from that question that he once gave Abaye, it sounds like he's assuming that yes, abbreviations are in fact valid. He was just wondering, wait, how about if it's ambiguous abbreviation? Does that work or not? So we answer, no, not necessarily. No, Papa was only asking from one of the various opinions that Shemuel said. He was asking to Abaye. In other words, Shemuel said a number of things, and there were two statements that seemed to contradict each other. And one sounded like ambiguous abbreviations are valid, and one said they're not valid. So Papa was asking Abaye, according to Shemuel, hey, does he think it is or not? But Papa himself, he was not expressing his own opinion, just pointing out a contradiction within Shemuel. And therefore, no, Papa did not say and did not know the answer to that. That was the question, and we leave it at that. Final question, Ba'eda Papa. Yesh la yad lepe'ah or en yad lepe'ah? Hechi dameh. Pe'ah, a corner of a field you have to leave. It's generally about 1/60th of a field that one leaves. And you have to declare, this is pe'ah, right? And you specify a certain section at the edge of the field. Now, if you didn't say the full language, but you only said an abbreviation, a yad, does that work for a pe'ah? So what exactly is the case? He says, this furrow, I want that to be pe'ah. And then he looks at another furrow and he says, and this one also. Then surely that would be pe'ah. The question is, when he said, first he said, this furrow will be pe'ah, and then he said, and this one. Now, if he says, and this one, you don't know, it's too ambiguous. Does he mean, and this one is also pe'ah? Or he mean, and this one, I'm going to keep for myself. And this one, I'm going to give as a birthday present to my friend. So since it's ambiguous, and it's not valid, that is our question. Okay. Where, as a tangent, we're noting that, by the way, if a person says, my entire field, I want to make pe'ah, that would be valid. Because, how can we infer that? Well, it's from the fact that we can tell from here that a person can give more than the minimum amount for pe'ah if he wants. How can you tell that? If the first furrow, let's say in this case, right, we just said vehaden. If the first furrow was too small to be a pe'ah, it was less than 1/60th, then everyone would agree. It would be clear that when he says vehaden, he means for pe'ah, because the first one is too small. So he says vehaden, that's obvious from the context that he's adding that furrow, and that would also be pe'ah. The question only would come up when the first furrow that he said was 1/60th. That was sufficient. And then when the next one he says vehaden, does that mean, wait, vehaden I'm keeping for myself, or is that pe'ah? So that is the question. So incidentally, we can see that if he in fact desired, if we assume that it means pe'ah, and that's what he meant, then it would be pe'ah. So that means that someone can give more than a 60th of his field for pe'ah, and more than 60th, how much? Even the whole field he can give. Right? So can we derive from this very question, the fact that you're asking the question about more than a 60th, can we derive that if you give the whole field as pe'ah, then that would be valid? Or do you say it have to be a corner? It says a corner of the field, so it has to be something of the field, and maybe it can't be the whole field. So in fact, yes, we can derive that you can make the whole field pe'ah. V'hatanya, as we say, this v'hatanya is not a question, but as a yes, in fact, indeed, there's a braita that supports it. Minayin she'im doseh la'asod kol sadeh pe'ah oseh tamud lomar pe'at sadecha. How do you know that if a person wants to make his entire field as a gift to the poor? He can do so because it says pe'at sadecha. We're reading it as pe'at equals sadecha. It could be, if you wanted, pasuk just said pe'ah. So the fact that it says pe'at sadecha means even the whole sadeh can be given as pe'ah. All right, now back to the question. What's the story? If you say hadin, does that make it pe'ah or not? Now, mi amrinan. כיוון דאיתקש לקורבנות, מה קורבנות יש להם יד, אף פאה יש לה יד. Here's the two sides of the question. Do we say that since pe'ah is juxtaposed with korbanot, we're going to see in just a second where that juxtaposition is, what pasuk it is, because they are juxtaposed to each other. Just like regarding korbanot, you can use an abbreviation. So too for pe'ah, yes, you can use an abbreviation. So yes, it would be pe'ah when you said hadin. Or maybe when we juxtapose them, that's for the law of Baal Ta'acher. Just like you cannot delay giving a korban for too long, so too pe'ah, you cannot delay giving pe'ah for too long. But we're not comparing it for yad, and in fact, an abbreviation would not work for pe'ah. Okay, that will be the two sides of the question. Where do we see this juxtaposition? That's in the following braita. Me'imach ze leket shichecha upe'ah. It's from this pasuk here. Ki tidor neder l'Adonai Elohecha lo ta'acher leShelemah. So you see this talking about general neder, and you should make sure not to delay it. Ki darosh yidreshenu, that God will require it of you. From those words we learn korbanot, or required korbanot, you cannot delay. So from the word me'imach, we include leket, shichecha, and pe'ah. Leket, if you forget a sheaf, one ear in the field. Shichecha, if you forget an entire sheaf in the field, you have to leave it there for the poor. And pe'ah, the corner that you have to leave for the poor. So me'imach comes to include in this pasuk, make sure to leave these things for the poor. And it's juxtaposed. So since it's juxtaposed right before for lo ya'acher, does that mean only that you have to give these in a timely manner? Or maybe it means that it's the equivalent for other laws, like abbreviations that are valid for korbanot would be valid for pe'ah as well. We leave the question open, and on the next stuff, we're going to ask for other items as well, like tzedakah. Does an abbreviated formula, is that valid or not? Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen v'amen.